And
once you get started. All right.
All right. Okay, I think we're right. Hi, Kathy here with Kristine, and welcome to this week's webinar. Yeah, we've got numbers coming in. Sorry, we're a little bit late. Technical
difficulties.
But always. So, welcome along to this week's webinar, and I'm sorry you've got two screens there. One of a photo of me with clearly a different hairstyle, but anyway, it's probably a little outdated. And then you've got us in person, and we'd like you to have just one thing that you're looking at, but technical glitches. And this is a really special webinar for IIMHCO today, because we've got myself as a regular host and our guest, but we're actually together in the same country. We are in New Zealand, in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and in fact, what's particularly special about this particular location is it's a place called the Hokianga Harbour, which is birthplace of Aotearoa, New Zealand, and this is where Kupe, the Polynesian explorer, first landed in New Zealand, and the very first Maori villages were built. In fact, if I swing the camera around, swing it around, that hill right there that you can see is called Whiria, and that is the very first place where a first Maori part or Maori village was built in this country. So that we're talking about birth today, and we're in the birthplace of Aotearoa, New Zealand, is just awesome, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So I'm going to get Kristine first to introduce herself to you, and her background is just extraordinary. What she's been doing over the many decades as a midwife. And I'm just going to swing this over. Sorry. While I look for something. And yes, so swing it around to you. And yeah, because everybody knows me. So talk about you and tell them all about your amazing background.
My least favorite thing to do.
Yeah, well, you just don't hold back, because it's incredible. Okay. And then you'll understand where, we're coming from today on this particular topic about, women's birth of fear and midwives' birth of fear, particularly in these times where, things are so, midwives are feeling so overworked and underpaid, and in a lot of cases under-resourced. And the women themselves, when birth has really never been so safe, and when we look over thousands and thousands of years, women have really kind of never been so fearful. So it's a really bizarre situation. But yeah, let's please don't shortcut this background. Go through it, because it's amazing.
All right. So I've been a midwife for 34 years now. I started out with a home birth practice. I did an apprenticeship for 3 years in the Amish community. And during that apprenticeship, I learned all aspects of birth, including breech and twins. And it was just something that was normally taught to me, and I didn't really realize until I got out on my own as a practitioner that those things weren't altogether normal in the birth community, or viewed as normal. And a lot of midwives did not have breech and twins skills, or some of the other skills that I learned within my training. And so I was the midwife in my area that did a lot of those types of things. Since then, I have started working abroad. I'm probably in about 10 years into my career. I knew that I wanted to work in other countries and see what midwifery was like in other countries, but also do some sort of humanitarian aid. And I wasn't sure exactly what that would look like. Way back then, we didn't have the internet. And so, it was difficult to research things like that. But I went to Guatemala, and I was there for 3 years. That's where my son was born. He'll be 23 in January, just to give some context of when that was. And
he got to travel to so many countries as a little one, but you'll get to that.
He
Amazing.
did. And I went back to the States briefly, and then after a few years, I realized I didn't really want to be there and practicing. After experiencing what things were like in Guatemala and how autonomous midwives could actually be. And I also wanted to give back and serve in some sort of way. I worked in Senegal and Ghana. My son was with me in those places. I went to Southeast Asia after the earthquake and tsunami in Thailand and Sumatra. And so I was there volunteering and working. Robin Lim had set up a center, a clinic in Aceh, Sumatra at that time. And so I went and worked for her. And since then, since my son grew up, I also was doing intermittently, I was doing home births while I was in the US, occasionally, as little as I possibly could, because the climate for midwifery there isn't so great. And I didn't enjoy it as much. And so I applied for a position, or, to be put in the pool for Doctors Without Borders. And that is, I was accepted. And that's what I've been doing since 2018. And even through the pandemic, because humanitarian crises do not stop for a pandemic. In fact, they're exacerbated by a pandemic. And so I've continued to travel all throughout the pandemic to different countries. So since 2018, I've been working in Afghanistan, Bolivia, Bangladesh, Mozambique, Sierra Leone, and mostly recently South Sudan. And back in September, I was on the search and rescue ship in the Mediterranean. So that's it in a nutshell.
Yep, and you are amazing background. How many babies do you estimate you've caught?
A little over 5,000, because I've been to some pretty high volume. In Afghanistan, we were attending about 700 women a month, give or take, in any given month. So it was, that's a lot in a short period of time. So those numbers increase. A
pretty impressive amount. And that's for sure. And Kristine is in New Zealand with the Breech Without Borders team at the moment, and they are teaching in New Zealand and Australia in the last month and this month and the coming month. And how many Breech births have you caught?
Just over 500.
So it's so impressive. It's our honor to have you here. And it is such a crazy situation where there's clearly increasing levels of fear for midwives in practice. I was speaking to a British midwife just last week who she goes, look, I just can't do it anymore. She goes, we should have 14 on our birthing suite. We've got 7. I just feel unsafe. I have to stop practicing, and that's the last thing, of course, she is well aware that's the last thing that, that hospital needs is another midwife resigning. But, what do you do when you're actually feeling unsafe?
Right.
So it's a big topic, but and I know that you, Kristine, have done some really interesting blogging on, as well around that exhaustion. You have a term for it. What do you call it?
Oh, yeah, compassion fatigue.
There we go.
Not my term,
fatigue,
but compassion fatigue, and it goes hand in hand with vicarious trauma, which is just a natural result of, I think, anybody in healthcare that works doing direct patient care. You're going to have a certain level of vicarious trauma and compassion fatigue. And specifically in the field, when I'm doing humanitarian aid, there's an overwhelming amount, but just in any given maternity or any home birth practice, community-based practice, there's a level of compassion fatigue and vicarious trauma there too.
And what do you, what's probably the most striking differences that you see when you're dealing with women in labour and their levels of fear from when they're in, in the Western world and they're in a, tertiary hospital versus what you're seeing in, in third world and developing countries. So the women themselves, what's that difference, that main differences of levels of fear that you see?
I guess it would be, it's just very basic fear. A lot of times it's the primates who they're just afraid of the pain, or just in general, what's going to happen or how the process is going to be. But they tend to have pretty straightforward, shorter labors because they don't have a lot of fear in the way, like I think we do in the West, where we overthink birth. And there, every woman, everybody has known at least one person who has died giving birth, and probably more. Most of them have lost, with any kind of history, most of them have lost babies or children at some point in time in pregnancy or in early childhood. So death is very commonplace, and they know going into it that they might not survive it, and yet they still don't have the same level of fear, I think, that we see in the West.
And that just doesn't make any sense, right? That they've got more to be fearful of and they're less fearful. So why do you think that is? Or why do you think Westernized women are so fearful?
Because they're not exposed to birth on a daily or just on a routine basis, whereas in some of these, when we took birth and death out of the home, we saw an increase in fear. I mean, everybody is fearful because most people have not seen someone die a natural, death process, like grandfather at home dying in his own bed and the family gathers around. We have hospice care now, but a lot of people still they'll be in hospice in the hospital, and you have the choice of going to see them or not. So we've taken death out of the home at about the same time, at least in the US, when we took birth out of the home, and then we hid it away, and then it's this mysterious thing that happens, and then you get the stories, but you're not exposed directly to it.
Yeah.
And I see little girls coming into the maternity with their aunties or their sisters, and they're there, and they know that the babies come out. There's a lot of noise involved in it, and a lot of work, but they come out, and those little girls know that. But unless somebody's having a home birth, their children aren't exposed, and so they don't grow up knowing that birth is a normal, natural process.
Yeah, absolutely. And for most Westernized women, when for primates, when they go into labour, that is the very first labour they'll ever witness,
right?
And it's their labour.
Yeah.
And their main birth support person typically is their male partner, and he definitely hasn't given birth. So we've got these two newbies, and I would have to. We've obviously been chatting over the last day or so, and there's that lack of knowledge, that lack of prenatal education. Like just doing, typically on and those things have changed around the pandemic, on doing group classes and that sort of thing. But typically those group classes, which are really are no longer sort of a fit for purpose thing, some of them, but. We've had that same style of prenatal education going back decades and decades and decades, right? Yeah. Probably from the really 70s. And typically they might have 6 classes over the course of 6 weeks, and one of them will be on labour and birth. So their whole education is, maybe, a couple of hours during, it's just not enough, right? Yeah, scary not enough.
And so speaking of that, you tell me a little bit more, because we haven't gotten a chance to talk about it, about the program that you created and who it's best.
So that was something that came out and really got prompted through the pandemic. I mean, people getting, because at the beginning of the pandemic, most people didn't even know what Zoom was. I mean, Zoom was something that was used, by businesses, let alone families. And so the whole idea of dealing with education online has just so permanently changed, isn't it? And even like within universities, there's so many things that they used to not do online, which they had to do online, and now they're keeping doing it online. So that culture has changed. So, and a part of that motivation through that period was I put together a online program, which is basically just www.motherwise.app, so Motherwise app, and it consists of like 50 different videos or like mini videos of all different topics and things, and I would have to say, hand on heart, it is the most comprehensive prenatal education program that I've seen anywhere online, and it was a great sort of team that helped me put that together. But it is, but I'm not saying it's the only education anybody should need. It's not, because even within that, I'll be saying, look, go and read that book and go and do this, and oftentimes we'll see, with women with their second birth, that's when they will really get engaged, because they've had this horrific, traumatic, horrible experience, and they're like, that is not happening in my next labour, and that's not happening to my next baby. And now they get engaged, and they really learn about natural labour and all that. They get themselves empowered. But I think that if we sum it up, that really the main issue why our Western women are more fearful than our developing country woman is just because they've seen less.
Yes.
They just don't know as much.
Yes. And I don't think that movies and TV shows that depict birth, that it's almost always a big emergency, and the birth is never depicted in any kind of realistic way. And it's so that perpetuates this the negativity or the fear. It's either funny because it's in a romantic comedy, so the woman's yelling at the husband that she's never going to let him touch her again, or it's like, oh my gosh, the baby is breech, we have to turn it around, and they do all sorts of ridiculous things, and they just make birth scary and dangerous and a big emergency all the time. It's just rarely do we see birth depicted in a normal sort of way. What it's really like. It's probably like watching sitting in an actual courtroom and watching something. It's actually really boring. It's not like it is in the movies where it moves along, there's all this suspense. Same thing with birth. A lot of it's just a lot of waiting and watching. It's really quite uneventful. I won't say boring, because I don't think it is, but it's uneventful until the very end, and then you have the grand finale, and that's quite exciting. But the majority of it is not fun. It doesn't sell tickets to movies. So that's part of it. And it's really so what you're saying, what I'm saying was, nothing in person, and Hollywood dramatizing things, and a little bit of basic education somewhere along the way, or quite often, if they do engage in some paid education, it can have quite a strong agenda to it. It's a particular take on labour and birth, rather than giving a really broad, empowering them with all the sort of things that might potentially happen, and feeling confident with that. So, and by the way, those of you who are here live with us today, it's lovely to have you live, and we've got a whole lot of you have registered for this webinar, but we know that you're watching it later down the track with your different time zones. But if you do have any particular commentary or questions, put it on in there into that Q&A, and we'll chat through that today, because it would be nice to have it a little bit interactive. But
so we've kind of summed up the woman in a way. I mean, we've oversimplified things, but we've summed it up. But if we talk about the midwives, you know, what's the differences that you are seeing over, you know, your decades of being in practice, and have you seen a big difference in the level of fear that midwives had 30 years ago and what they have now, and how it's changed? Or, you know, litigation, I guess, comes in there very much.
Yeah, but in a lot of ways, especially in the U.S., midwifery has changed quite a bit, and it's a lot more medicalized. I think they're teaching a lot. I mean, now I know midwives who carry handheld ultrasounds, and they have the pulse ox. They have all these things that they routinely use. Not just we have these things, and in case there were things that I never used for months or even a few years at a time. It's like I have them here just in case. But a lot of things are being routinely used now, and it's much more medicalized. And I think they feel like it gives them a lot more legitimacy. And at the moment, they have all these medical type things, and birth is not a medical event, generally speaking. As you know, the average woman is not. She's just going to have her baby and doesn't need all of these extra things. And so some of it is fear of litigation, or just fear of being turned in or reported to the authorities for doing this or that outside of the scope of practice, or whatever it might be. But there's fear on a lot of levels, and just generally, I think a lot of midwives have fear because they experience something scary during a birth, and they may or may not have known how to handle it, or may have felt like it was just very frightening, even if they did handle it successfully. And so then they have this fear then going forward, and they'll change the way they practice based on one thing that happened that time. And so yeah, I talk
about what happens with that debrief afterwards.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, if their colleagues are particularly supportive and
Right.
saying, "Oh my God,
Yes.
okay," or are they, you know, or are you feeling told off?
Yes.
Well, what did you do? Why were you doing it? You know, why did you do it home? And you're just like, oh,
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So it's multifaceted, and it's really unfortunate that we have all of this fear surrounding birth, because a midwife going into a birth environment, bringing her own fear, there's no way that the patients or clients are not going to be able to feel that in some way. They put that it's out there, they sense it. And I think when you walk into the birth room, you really need to leave your fear and your ego at the door, and you walk in. It's not about you, it's about them. You're there to do a job, and that job might be literally just to sit and observe for the most part. I mean, with the exception of, you know, being responsible and getting hard tones when they need to be, but otherwise you probably don't need to talk all that much. You probably don't need to do a whole heck of a lot. You just let the process unfold. And if the woman needs more support, she needs her back rubbed, the partner doesn't know exactly where to do it, you show them, they're still not doing it right, sometimes they still prefer you, you know. I mean, that's basically it. And all of the other stuff may or may not have to come out of the bag, but otherwise you can really, it's about just letting the process unfold, being on guard for anything that might not be right, and that's your job. Otherwise, you don't go looking for trouble.
yeah. And it actually reminds me, that I did I'm not a case loading midwife anymore. I'm in semi-retirement. But when I did a lot of primary care, what we call primary care births, a lot of births into births and home births. And I remember because we would often have a second midwife would come in to assist with the actual birth. And I remember having a second midwife at one point who was this older midwife, and as soon as she got there, she sat down and got out her knitting.
Yeah.
you know, and how relaxed does the mother feel when the midwife is just doing knitting? Because she was watching, you know, she's here, and she knows everything that's going on, but does she need to do anything? No. And that would, and I don't know how to knit, but I was like, oh, that's a good talent to have as a midwife.
I knit and I crochet, and I will tell you, it really helps that any kind of nervous tension you're feeling. It's like, I'm knitting, my hands are in a rocking chair and
So
say,
that's wonderful, right?
no, I love that. I love just to sit in the corner of the room. They know that I'm there, and it's okay. I'm listening. I'm watching. I know. I know what to listen for.
Yeah.
And then if they look up at me and they get that, there is that moment when that baby gets right down there into that pelvis just before pushing starts, and they you hear the change in their vocalizations, and then they look at you like something just happened, and you can rush in and go, it's okay. It's just your baby moved. All you have, I will go, smile and nod and be like, yeah, that was good, whatever, because that look on their face tells me all I need to know, and I don't have to say any words. I know what happened. And taking that woman from her lizard brain, where they have to be to give birth, to her thinking brain by explaining to her what is happening in her body when she feels it. She just needed to know that was okay that she felt it. Was that okay? That looked like, ugh. And it's the same thing when, you know, stuff comes out and they're like, is this okay? Perfectly normal. It's just nodding and saying, yeah, you're good. So yeah, the minimal amount of intervention, but yeah, knitting is a good way to keep your hands off of stuff and make you stop meddling.
And so what's with your vast experience in the developing world, and obviously in American hospitals as well, what's the difference in the fear level of the midwives, you know, in the third live situation and the tertiary care hospital? What are you seeing as the difference in the fear levels of those midwives?
Yeah,
I mean, I know we're generalizing, but
yeah, I would say, you know, there's always that fear of, again, it's litigation, it's being blamed for something. In the West, we expect good outcomes every time. Everybody expects a live mother and a live baby, and everybody's fine. And the truth is it doesn't matter where you are in the world. That's not always possible. Not if you go into midwifery thinking you're never going to see death, or maybe just some miscarriages here and there, you're going to be sorely disappointed because it does involve death sometimes, because not every pregnancy goes to term. Not every term pregnancy ends with a live baby. And it doesn't always have to do with something that the provider did or didn't do. It would have happened anyway.
but we still be opening over the coals to
still get blamed.
yes. And you very much do feel like you are guilty until you prove yourself innocent.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And so the difference is that, you know, in these other countries, that is not the expectation. Everyone knows that birth doesn't always end with a live baby. And they know that sometimes the mothers are lucky to get through the birth. And I have been thanked by many a grandmother for taking good care of her daughter, even though the baby did not survive. They're like, thank you, because she's okay. And this is what I'm concerned about. The mother is their primary concern in those instances. It's not about, I mean, of course, we do our utmost to save the baby, and everybody wants a live baby, but not all babies make it for a variety of reasons, especially in those environments. So, but they're very grateful when a woman makes it, because they know that it's very possible that she might not.
That grandmother could have
yes.
Both of them.
Yes, the mortality rate in sub-Saharan Africa is, they bear the highest burden. They're about, it's not quite 75% of all maternal deaths occur in So when you look at the whole, so there's like 265,000 maternal deaths per year, and 200,000 of them happen in sub-Saharan Africa and the countries that I go to. And in Sierra Leone or in South Sudan, the last place I was, just in 6 months, I had 5 maternal deaths in that time. So, but none of them were due to the usual suspects like postpartum hemorrhage, hypertension, those types of things, or sepsis. They were due to other things that would not have even been prevented in our countries. So, because the women came in far too sick, far too late, and there was nothing that could be done for them. But nobody bled to death on my watch. Nobody got septic and died. You know, all of those we were able to prevent. So you have to focus on the things you were able to do, and not the ones you weren't.
So the midwives there are not, and the obstetricians obviously as well. When you're working in that environment, you're not fearful of the career consequences to you with negative outcomes. But in the West, you are.
Yes.
Every day you walk onto that birthing suite, you know, you just know, is this the day where something goes incredibly pear-shaped, and you know, you end up in front of some disciplinary committee and pear-shaped. Oh. Yeah, I'll say yeah. Maybe it's a British term. I don't know that it's unique to New Zealand. Yeah, so you know, you're very consciously aware of that. So if we summed up the main, your thoughts on the main reason for fear, apart from potentially being, you know, just overworked, understaffed, because you know you can't kind of get to everything.
Yeah.
But if you are, you know, you've got a full crew, you've still got that fear. And it's the fear of getting blamed, getting burnt over the coals.
Yeah.
And when you know that you've done everything, you know, you hope you did everything you should, and you're only human in being as well.
Yeah.
And isn't it sad?
It's very stressful to be the subject of any kind of investigation or even just gossip. You know,
Yes.
I heard this and I heard that. That didn't happen at all. The telephone thing,
Yeah.
like I heard this happen, and then people have their own piece. Well, why did they do this? I don't know, maybe. And then that part gets added to the story. Oh, yeah, and this is why I don't practice in the U.S. because I would be, you know, I don't want to have a target that's
Unique to you.
we don't know. That's just my
Yeah.
experience.
Any westernized birthing suite, practically. And you made a comment last night when we were chatting where you said something like, you find it a whole lot less stressful, you know, working in a third world country where you can just kind of get on with it in comparison to working in a westernized hospital. And I'm like, I mean, it's crazy, right? When you're thinking of all the scary stuff clinically that you're dealing with there, and the levels of zero prenatal care that the woman had had, and the medical complications they come into it. But even then, with all of that, it's stressful.
It's a different kind of stress, and it's a stress that I'm willing to take on, and I've learned how to manage. It can be quite exhausting, and like I said, there's vicarious trauma involved, but I've learned how to manage that and how to process it. But I can't manage the birth culture within the U.S. and yes, all of it, just all of it. It's just it's too much. I have to learn how to do that. It's too difficult. I have to not care about too much, and it's difficult. It's difficult.
Yeah. You would have seen it worsen over those months.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got Please come through here. You know, we'd love to hear from you. It has. It was so still.
Hopefully they're not getting a whole bunch of windy sound.
Oh yeah, we'll have a look at the comments and see if there are. There is an echo when you speak. Oh,
Uh-oh. Is the echo still there? Can somebody?
okay. Look, we're going to move aside, and I'm not sure, but yeah, we can't do anything about the. Well, yeah, if there's an echo, all we can do is apologise on that one. It's very difficult to understand because of the poor audio quality and echo. I'm loving the conversation. So somebody else is doing, but look, because the one has picked up, we'll just go inside, and that might help to improve things a little bit anyway. So, if you carry that one, and I'll carry this one. So just hold on, everybody.
Do I have to carry this one? Maybe this is the problem.
I hope you're appreciating all the casualness of us today. Okay. Okay. We thought it was just so nice out there, and it was so still, and it was lovely. Maybe it was going to be better. Oh, we're going to go out of it. Okay. Right. Okay, so let's just have a little comments here. It's just great to get you talking as well. So anybody can type into the chat, but we're really using the Q&A section, which should be somewhere at the bottom of your screen, that you can go in there. Yeah, okay. And our next one. Okay, get rid of that. Western world, so a comment here from Rachel. Western world medicine has no self-care or respect for the healing strength of family and community. Women in labour expect to lie down, stay still, and let it happen to them. Yeah, in a developing country, they rely on community and each other for support. The woman digs deep and uses her emotional strength as well as her physical movement. Yeah. I mean, the second part of your comment about the developing countries, yeah, absolutely, you're the expert on that. I would say that in the Western world, it does vary a lot, you know, from country to country and practice to practice, you know, and obstetrician to obstetrician sort of thing. So, you know, there is, it just depends, I think, isn't it? I mean, it's cultural, the environment of that particular birthing centre or hospital, and of course birthing centres, you know, tend to be more in the that primary care. So very difficult to understand. We're so sorry about the audio quality. Loving the conversation. This is so deep and so many levels. Thank you. That's an awesome comment, Charlotte. Okay, so that's all of those coming through live. Yeah, so one of the we had some other questions that we'd sort of or topics that we'd put together as well. So I know that within your blogs you are you know, fairly regularly sort of talking about that compassion fatigue. And what do you think, now that you've worked in the West and you've worked in the developing countries, you know, what do you think is the thing that midwives could be doing better so that we just get less fatigued in the West? You know, what opportunities are we missing of stuff that we could be doing more self-care, or what? Yeah. What's your thoughts there?
Well, I think there is a tendency, at least amongst midwives in my country, to have this, it's this whole heroic sort of mentality around birth. Oh, I'm doing all of these births and I haven't been home in days. I've hardly seen my partner and my kids, and they think that this is a good thing, and it makes them sound like, and I've done this many births in this amount of time, just taking on too much. and not remembering or not understanding that this will all catch up with them, and the less they take care of themselves, the more they are apt to, when there is a traumatic birth, and there will be a traumatic birth, even if it's managed well, it can really wipe them out. And
it's like that you don't realize that they're teetering.
yes,
And that one thing is the one that actually they walk away and go, I can't do it anymore.
I can't do it anymore. Yeah.
Because it was so actually so low.
Yes. Yes, and there's nothing heroic about, you're not going to win any awards for not being at your kids' violin recital or soccer games, or missing all of those things in your life that are important in your family life while you're experiencing major life events in someone else's life. I mean, obviously it's what we do, it's part of our job, but by overbooking and overworking and not having more clear boundaries, I think it's very difficult there needs to be some sort of a balance there. Otherwise that compassion fatigue does catch up with you. And I talk to midwives all the time where it happens to them. They're like, yes, you're absolutely right. I need to this, I need to that. It's very, very difficult, especially when you're the sole practitioner of your practice and you need to make money. It's hard. It's a hard thing to balance, but I think that's the biggest thing that I see. And also taking things, for something happens in a birth, maybe it's just even a transfer from home to hospital, and the midwife just takes it so like it was the worst thing in the world, like it was all within in her control, and it's a failure, it's her failure that they transferred in, or that this patient had a cesarean, and oh my gosh, and I was expecting her to have, give birth vaginally, and you're taking it on like it's your own, and it's not, it's someone else's experience, and you're just bearing witness to it, and you can't take it on as your own. That's making the birth all about you. And this is where I think a lot of midwives get into trouble, because they make the birth experiences of their clients about them. And if they're good, they're like, oh, they're good, and they had a beautiful birth, and then they feel good about themselves. Whereas if you're sitting back and it's all about them, it's like, yeah, you did it. And you just facilitated the process to unfold, but it wasn't about you. So if the birth doesn't go well, it's not about you. I mean, you have to look at it. If you feel like you made an error or a judgment, that's a little different. But just because someone has a cesarean does not mean you failed as a midwife. You don't have that kind of control. And just because their birth was perfect doesn't mean it was all you're doing. So I think we have to stop looking at it that way. At least that's what I see in my country.
Yeah, I would very much agree with you from what I've seen. And I think that midwifery is, that's where there's a real difference sometimes that you see between midwives and, say, nurses. When nurses don't take it on that they have failed, and a patient, because it's that whole thing that we're looking after, that journey of, right through. And definitely there's such a common narrative of,
it's good.
Okay. There's such a common narrative of just think of the battery. But there's such a common narrative of midwives expressing about, especially the case loading ones that are, not so much the shift working midwives, but those case loading self-employed midwives who, are 24/7 on call. And it is so often the conversations about, oh my God, you catch up with someone, it's like, how's your week been? Oh my God, I had 3 births this week, and this and that, and then this happened and that happened, and you're like, oh my, and it is like, I get the venting, but it's almost it's like you're your own sacrificial lamb, you're your own martyr.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like a pride in the martyrdom of what you're doing.
It's like the whole heroic thing. Look at how heroic I am. I haven't had any time to myself or my family. I'm attending all these births, and I don't really see anything heroic in that.
Right, because what you, yeah, and we all know that there'll be, when you are a caseloading midwife, there will be weeks where, I remember one particular 2-week period where I had something like 16 births in 2 weeks. I said, and you're just like, what, right? But it should stand out that that's odd and weird because, like 2 weeks before that, I had no births, and 3 weeks after that, I had no births, right? Because they could all have at the same time.
Which is very different than it's consistently you're completely burned out and have
because
nothing
that's
left.
just how you're doing things and doing it much more. Yeah. Okay. So that's so I think that's it's such it's almost like a sense of pride.
Yeah.
And it's like we need to question ourselves that we're getting proud about that, because that's not, that's a terrible.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Not to.
So what I've got here from Vanessa, in the hospital, fetal heart rate is expected to be taken every 15 minutes. This is a lot of disturbing the birth space. In the home setting, how to maintain safety without disturbing the momentum. I would myself, I would usually, with a completely healthy, normal, woman and baby and spontaneous natural labour, in a primary care setting, home birth or birth centre, I would be listening in probably every 20 minutes or so. What do you do in a third birth? What's the protocols there?
We generally in labor will listen about once an hour until pushing starts, and then a little bit more frequently. Yeah. We're not doing too much to act on fetal distress in any case, even when we detect it. So there have been times when we've been taking heart tones and they've been going down a little, and I remember one time I took heart tones on this particular baby because the staff had said, yeah, it looks like we have some distress here. And I listened, and they were about 60, but she still had a ways to go in her labor. And so I said, okay, well, just stop taking heart tones, because we don't need to listen to nothing, because we're not going to hear anything.
Because you don't have the option.
Don't have the option
of doing
the theater for only for maternal indications. So it's a hard thing, and it might sound like, oh, I just said no, don't listen to the fetal heart tones. Don't think I wasn't crushed inside, that we couldn't do anything. That we couldn't do anything for this baby. It's hard. Like those days when it's just really hard, and then you have to, the mother has to give birth to this baby, and then you have to tell her, sorry. It's awful. And it's the worst part of the job.
It's very, very tough. When you know that if that woman was in another country, that it would be a very different outcome. So I'm guessing maybe, Vanessa, that you're not a midwife, that you are a mum to be perhaps. And I think really from again, it sort of comes down to a bit of a litigation issue that, if a midwife fails to listen to that fetal heart, fairly regularly, boy, how you'd be in serious trouble. And when you think about it, that is the only way to be knowing how baby's doing.
Right, exactly.
So yeah, but it shouldn't be too disturbing, and you can, usually you'd be able to just kind of sneak on in there with the Doppler, listen for, 10 seconds and then you're out again. It shouldn't have to be a case of the woman, changing the whole position or something. Yeah, so it should be able to occur without a lot of disturbing. Yeah,
I just take the Doppler, I hold it up, and I'm like, I do this, I get consent to do the heart tones, and then they either move back and kind of bare their belly, or they shake their head no, or do this, like, well, hold on, whatever. But I don't even say, okay, now I need to listen to the heart tones because it's been 15 minutes, there's no need.
No, that's the disturbing part.
Yeah, that's the disruptive part.
Yeah, I agree.
Disturbing.
Yeah, and it's about having that conversation at the beginning. So when you're in labour, I'm going to listen to the baby every 15 to 20 minutes or so. And then it would be normal during the pushing start, part, that second stage where we'd listen between every conjunction. Yeah, so now what's the next comment here? Midwives are horrible to each other, especially if something happens to a midwife they view as a bit fringe or radical. Oh, that is very true, right? Yeah, yeah, they pile on to her with criticism. The few peer reviews I've witnessed or participated in with none and local midwives were either a joke or an imposition. It's taken finding my midwife tribe outside my local community for me to find support for fearless, autonomous birth care. Look, Cindy, you have absolutely hit the nail on the head on that one. And yeah, very, very true.
Cindy is, she's in the US, and yeah, that's exactly it. And
it's not just in the US.
No, it's not just in the US. But yeah, I agree. And a debrief with a midwife should be, or peer review, whatever you want to call it. They should be informative and unbiased. It should be a discussion about, so what transpired, what did you do right, what could you have done differently, what do we think? But it should not be anything like an imposition. We're supposed to support each other. Do you think? And I always tell midwives when they're going to turn in another midwife, I'm like, do you think doctors do this too? Doctors in hospitals? You think if one of them makes a mistake, they turn each other in?
They don't.
They protect each other. They don't say anything. And it's all yes, nothing. They don't do that. They don't do that.
Listen, I would say, sadly, from my observation, that is a culture that comes from the highest levels. Certainly from what I've seen. And, so it is, it's like sort of, the senior midwives are doing it to the juniors, and it's just like, it goes all the way down. Yeah. And yeah, so you're very right. And it's a sad, sad situation. It is, I guess, almost there's like a justification that, I don't know, like when you are a midwife who does a lot of normal births, there seems to be almost a little bit of that tall poppy syndrome, what radical things is she doing? What's she got in her bag, She's using that homeopathy drops again, what's that sort of funny, weird things going on?
Yeah.
She has all these normal births. Rachel says, we all need to slow down and reflect with a colleague and friend. Take time to eat, rest, and resource ourselves with support from other birth workers. Book a massage with a friend and take a walk, etc., etc. Yeah, you're right, and it comes back to that self-care. I would say, it's finding that thing that helps you balance. And certainly, personal favourites for me would be yoga and meditation, and those two would help me kind of, just get back into equilibrium. But for others, it could be jogging, or it's finding that place where you defrag yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we're almost running out of time here, but in the UK, Rachel comments, you are bound by the NICE guidelines to listen in every 15 minutes. Yeah. And the woman can decline, of course, but it makes some midwives twitchy. Yeah. Yeah. And if they do decline, man, it's very well documented in the notes that it was declined.
Twitchy, if we expect that the heart tones are going to be just fine. While you have some that are not, but birth in and of itself just happens. So I don't get twitchy. I document and I just carry on. Now, if I did
Now,
that,
why are you getting twitching? Because of the repercussions, again, of something, when pear-shaped, and it's going to be all on them. Love it. And Vanessa makes a comment, she's not a midwife, haven't worked since.
Oh, she is a midwife.
No, she is a midwife. Haven't worked since COVID mandates, looking at going into private practice. Awesome. Whereabouts are you, Vanessa, in the world? That would be interesting to know. Yeah, it is that trickiness of, you know, knowing that you've ticked your boxes and you've, you know, crossed your T's and dot your I's and done everything that you must do. Because, you know, when there is a poor outcome, I guess, you know, because you see poor outcomes more frequently, sadly, in the developing world, people are less shocked by it. And whereas, because in the Western world, you know, every mother expects you know, and her family and her partners, and everyone expects that there'll be, you know, everyone alive and well.
Yeah.
You know, and I remember even my mother, who had her babies in the 50s and the 60s, and her saying to me one day, you know, that she goes, it was so normal back then. We all knew somebody who lost a baby. You know, she's like, we buried babies back then. You know, it happened. It wasn't a shocking event. And she said also that, I just found it interesting of your generation, that they never talked about their birth stories. Whereas now, of course, we're in the whole, that's another whole topic, we're in the social media where people are, you know, and again, the women themselves go into this almost level of martyrdom of, oh my God, you know, I had 36 hours of labor, and you know, and because my normal birth statistics were very high, because we did a lot of work in prenatal education of getting that woman into the place where she's empowered and knowledgeable, and a lot of complementary care where we're keeping her pregnancy as healthy as it possibly can be, so she's not developing a medical condition that is going to go induction, you know. So all of that, it's all, you know, complicated, but I would often have to say to a woman after they had these, well, you know, they're private first birth, it's beautiful, you know, she might have a couple of overnights of latent labour, and then she's gone and you know, had a lovely 4-hour, you know, normal birth, and it's beautiful, and she's wrapped and he's wrapped and the grandparents are wrapped and everybody's excited and the baby's feeding fantastically because it's an awesome condition and everything's going right. And, you know, I would kind of have to sit down with her at some point and go, you know, you are going to have people say to you, oh my God, you're so lucky. In my birth, I had blah, 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 blah. And I'll say to her, it's not luck. You know, there was so much engagement and preparation that went into lining all your ducks up in a row to make that happen. And but so the women are at that martyrdom as well. We don't have martyrdom culture.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, the midwives and the woman.
Yes. This whole need to tell somebody the worst birth horror story, that, you know, when they say, oh, I'm planning on having a home birth. Oh, my sister's cousin's aunt's nephew's wife had tried to have a home birth and they both almost died, because I hope that doesn't happen to you. And that whole why we feel the need to say negative things to pregnant women about birth and their choices and so forth is.
Or when the woman say, I'm planning not to have an epidural, and people go, yeah,
it's like a watermelon coming in. Yeah. Good for you. Yeah, like, great. I don't understand why we have to be so negative, because we don't do that for anything else.
No.
If somebody, you know, if somebody says, well, I have to go in and get my knee redone, it's like, okay, well, yeah, my nephew got his knee redone, and his recovery's been pretty good. And they don't go, I hope you don't die in surgery, and I hope that, you know, we just don't do that for anything else.
Ridiculous. You could bear it like that. No. It's sad, isn't it? It is. Oh, and Vanessa, you're in Australia. Oh, fantastic.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
I'm going to Sydney and then Tasmania.
Okay. Well, so you might be able to get to the Sydney one. Okay, and then we're going to wind this up soon because we have run over time, but we've just got a last. We're going to plan ourselves to go to brunch at a very cool overwater cafe. Okay, so Charlotte, yes, they can be cruel, but what can you do when many midwives do not always invite other midwives to those critical peer reviews? How can we start bringing back that need and ability to trust and learn from each other, even when there is an unfortunate outcome? How? It's got to come from the top down. You know,
I don't know. I really don't know. Oh, I'm going to see Vanessa in on.
There she goes. Vanessa just said that she will be
in Dr. Davis. I'm excited.
Cool. You have to live opposite of me, so I'm so excited. Well, you have to, yeah.
You know who I am.
Oh, that is wonderful. So look, it's been really lovely. It's been very special having Kristine here. It's been very cool for me, hosting a webinar with the person right here instead of doing it across the world, and that's really awesome. And New Zealand and Australia is very lucky at the moment to have you here and doing the teaching that you're going to be doing. And just while should we just wind up? Could you maybe just for those who could be watching this later down the track in time, maybe go over your contact details or like your blog and whatnot, and tell them a little bit about Breech. Without borders, So, and because at the moment you're just about to do New Zealand and Australia training, but do you have any other trainings like plans in the future in other destinations, or what's?
Oh yeah, the Breech Without Borders website and onto schedule, they can see all the places. Well, not all of the places, but the places we've so far booked for 2023. All over the world, including I think Guatemala, Bolivia, Canada, like all over the place. And then many states. So the schedule's there and we keep adding to it. My contact information, yes, midwifewithoutboundaries.wordpress.com.
I love that, midwife without boundaries.
And I think if you just type
breast.com.
Yeah, but I think just if you type midwife without boundaries, I think it comes straight away.
Okay, excellent. And the Breech Without Borders, the website for that.
Yeah,
but it's soft word, isn't it? Yeah. Oh, yes, I'll show you
the book. I bet it comes up backwards there. A Guide to Physiological.
No, we say that. Yeah.
The book.
Yeah, amazing.
It is amazing. Tons and tons of photos of breech births and a whole bunch of information regarding breech. And I mean, the photos are magnificent. There's hundreds of them. And everything you could ever want to know. This is the whole Breech Pro course in a book that Rick's put together because we teach plain midwives in the Amish communities and in Amish and Mennonite communities, and they don't have electricity, and some of them are not allowed even to go to someone's home to watch the online Breech Pro course, the hybrid course. So they study this and then they come to our simulations. So this was for them, and we realized other people wanted a book too. So Rick said just print a bunch of copies. And now
people can purchase them online?
Yes, yeah. You can go onto the Breech Without Borders site and it'll show, and then it's just
.com, isn't it?
.com or .org, breechwithoutborders.org. And but in New Zealand, there's a printer in New Zealand that prints them here. So if viewers are in New Zealand, in Australia, I think as well. I think so. I think there's a printer there that's doing it, and then those books get mailed out.
Right. Okay, or or just go through the Breech Without Borders .org and ask them there if they've got any questions. Cheers, ladies. Thank you, Jen. And birth workers can join in Clubhouse app discussion every Tuesday, 8 p.m. GMT UK time about physiological birth with Kimmy Joy Johnson. Okay. I might just, so thank you. Maybe I might just, actually, could you, Rachel, just email that through to us, info@imco.com, and I will put that comment into the post-webinar automated email that everybody who registered will receive, and we'll include it in there. That would just be great. Okay, thank you. So look, we're going to love you and leave you all. And thank you so much, Kristine and the Breech Without Borders team for coming to New Zealand. And thank you for those of you who are live today. It was wonderful to have you here. It was great to have that live audience. And for those of you watching it afterwards, well, we hope you've enjoyed it as well.
Thank you for inviting me. This was so much fun.
It was very cool. All right, so everybody have a wonderful rest of your week. So bye, everybody.